Before you get started making your own game or following your own path of research for game studies, you need to be able to understand what cliché is, mostly to avoid it. I will not be allowing you to use cliché in your work, ever, in all of my classes. There is only one exception to that rule: clichés that are aware of themselves, and I'll elaborate on that later. So, what are clichés? Well, the definition I'm most interested in is a cliché is an image that is so overused it has lost its meaning. And some examples of visual cliché are, especially here in Arizona, swirls and desert scenes, lonely roads going off into the distance, a lone tree, sailboats and beaches, sunsets and silhouettes, flying birds, kittens, puppies, babies, horses, crosses, blood, worms, skulls, anime, and superheroes. Yes, I'm including this in the clichés. And then there are some artists that are using cliché that is not aware of itself. And one such person is Ann Geddes, whose work I'm sure you've seen on postcards and posters and such. Thomas Kincaid is also not aware that he's using cliché. Art Rogers is a photographer who uses cliché extensively and is unaware of it. When a creative work is aware of its own use of cliché, that means the piece is aware of its limitations and points them out to the audience unabashedly. A work may break the fourth wall, acknowledge the clichés that it contains as it uses them, or may be placed in juxtaposition with works that are not cliched. There are other devices that can be used, but these are good examples. The most important thing is that the cliché is acknowledged at the same time that it is used by the piece itself.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that employee 427 did every day. Room 427. Stanley worked for Stanley went around. Stanley stepped into the Stanley just sat around. Stanley walked upstairs. Stanley was in such a rush. Stanley is quite a boy. Stanley for the first Stanley realized Stanley had never seen Stanley knew the office. Stanley can't Stanley just Stanley was still Stanley was making Stanley. Oh, come now. You don't want it to end already, do you? Why don't we begin again? Wait, how did you do that?
She hates me. She's disappointed. I could see it in her eyes when we met. I've got to stop sweating. Oh, she looked at my hairline. She thinks I'm bald. She's thinking I would never in a million years sleep with this guy.
We think you're great.
Oh, thanks. Wow, that's nice to hear. To begin, coffee would help me think. Coffee and a muffin. I'm going up to Santa Barbara this Saturday, and I was wondering.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
So I'll just be right back with your pie then.
Drum roll, please. I'm gonna be a screenwriter, like you.
I'm putting in a chase sequence. So the killer flees on horseback, cops after them on a motorcycle. And it's like a battle between motors and horses, like technology versus horse.
Susan, we would really like to option this. You want to make it into a movie?
I want to know what it feels like to care about something passionately. John LaRoche is a tall guy, sharply handsome.
The book has no story. There's no story. Make one up. Okay, we open with LaRoche. No, we open at the beginning of time. Okay, we open with LaRoche. He's a white man. We open on Charlie Kaufman. Fat, bald, ugly, paces. I've written myself into my screenplay. That's kind of weird, huh?
I guess we thought that maybe Susan and LaRoche could fall in love.
I just don't want to ruin it by making it a Hollywood thing. It's like I don't want to cram in sex or guns or car chases or characters overcoming obstacles to succeed in the end. She's crying. What's she hiding from us? I think you actually need to speak to this woman to know her.
People find love, people lose it. Every day, someone somewhere takes a conscious decision to destroy someone else.
This is our last dance. This is our last dance.
Who's gonna play me?
Oh,
I think I should play me.
Under pressure. Under pressure.
It's really a dream come true to have my work inside Versailles and outside. To have a piece like Split Rocker. It was inspired by, I thought this is the type of work that Louis Quatorze would wake up and have a fantasy that he would want to see. And he would tell his staff, and voila, he would come home, and in the evening there would be Split Rocker. Wanted to be here. And you know, all of the works are trying to be very, very generous, and to really combine these two surfaces, this surface of the 17th and 18th century with the surface of today, and that they're both fresh and contemporary. My interest in art is really how art has the ability to weave back through history. So it feels like two kind of parallel times. I just listened to myself and let the works present themselves very naturally. And so when I would go through the different salons, I could create something that was brand new just for this moment. But I looked at what I had done in the past, and all of a sudden, Michael Jackson would present itself and say, it wants to be in the Salon de Venus, or the self-portrait in the Salon de Apollo. And so it was a very, very natural process. They're all thrilled to be here. There's really a sense of equilibrium, of control and giving up control, nature and sensuality, and aspects of philosophy and theology. This is the abundance of human life and human potential. Because there's no other exhibition that has more meaning or feels more wonderful than this exhibition to me right now that has involved my work. And it just has to do with the richness and the appreciation of what art brings to the human condition. And art can bring us transcendence, and Versailles is the epitome of the example of that. And I hope that my work is richly involved in that dialogue. I think there's always a lot of confusion with my work where people think I am making a critique, and I'm not. I'm making an acceptance of ourselves and our own history to this moment. And in doing so, hopefully I'm also freeing what our potential is for the future, where we can feel empowered. When I've made my works, I've always have tried to pay attention to every detail and aesthetics. I mean, aesthetics are at the core of Versailles, and so every detail's been thought about here. So I really feel like a parallel interest, an interest in life and vitality and human potential. You always try to keep in mind your viewer, and you show respect to them, because the dialogue and the art really happens within the viewer. And so I'm understanding that people have different opinions about things, but I've always viewed Versailles as a place that's always been very open to positive information and opportunity, and and the work really tries to be a platform that helps people achieve their potential. So optimism is at the base of the work, and generosity.
So, Jeff Koons after Art Rogers. What Jeff Koons did is he created this piece that he got sued for, and on that link you will be able to see the argument as to why he felt he was able to do that, and why Art Rogers disagreed, and the outcome of the court case. Take a moment to go and read through that. Just skim through it. It's quite long, but I just want you to be aware of it. Next, I'm going to go over writing cliche examples, which if you create a game that has a narrative, I want you to avoid all of these cliches. So, characters describing themselves in mirrors is a cliche. This includes diaries or on a radio, like in Bioshock. It's easy because describing a character when you're writing in the third person is pretty easy when the narrative voice is omniscient, but first person is a bit of a challenge. How do you convey what your character looks like without making them sound vain or self-obsessed? So use mirror, right? That's why it's easy. Why it's a cop-out? Well, it's lazy, it's been done to death, and anyway, no one looks in the mirror and takes stock of all their features in severe detail. I would argue you don't need to belabor the description of your main character anyway. You can hit the big points. If your character's defining trait is a hairstyle or something like that, there are ways to work that into the narrative. For the rest of it, you have to trust the reader. First, they don't need to be coddled. Second, they'll project something onto the character. So, broadcasting an upcoming plot twist, like in the Da Vinci Code. It's easy because sometimes you need to give a little weight to characters and sit around and doing nothing, or make sure the reader is on his or her toes. What's wrong in hinting at things to come, right? That's why it's easy. Why it's a cop-out. This is a little did he know principle of storytelling. In the Da Vinci Code, toward the end of the book, the albino monk is captured by the story's heroes, and he says, and I'm paraphrasing here, little did he know that he'd soon turn the tables, leading me to ask, why would you broadcast a plot twist, especially in a book that's classified as a thriller? So Dan Brown isn't the only author to commit this crime. It's just the first example that came to me. So blaming bad behavior on bad parenting and vice versa. There's a movie called, there's Annie, which we're all aware of, and a movie called Case 39. They're both good examples of that. So why it's easy, it's hard to justify bad behavior. If your narrator is a creep, you still want him or her to be a redeemable creep, or at least someone damaged enough that their creepiness isn't so far-fetched. You know what makes people into creeps is that you can't really question, that you have to accept. Well, bad parents, right? So why it's a cop-out. Almost every messed up character in fiction can trace his or her issues back to being sexually abused or slapped around by parental units. Making the parents into monsters is an easy way to explain away bad behavior. It's too easy. The thing is, sometimes this can be profound or deeply affecting, but a lot of the time, the bad parents are just there for the sake of it. You know what's scarier? Someone growing up in a normal household and still becoming a creep. Too many inside jokes and references. Why it's easy? Because you need to make sure everyone knows you watched The Big Lebowski, right? Why it's a cop-out? Well, a few things stop me calling the story as an inside joke or belabored reference. We get it. You're funny. You watch cool stuff. But I would need two hands and both feet to count the amount of times I've read references to rugs that tied the room together. Writing for your friends or for your own ego is a sure way to alienate the reader. And I have a link here to the 10 great developer jokes in video games. So this happens in video games quite a lot. The chosen one, like in Star Wars. Why it's easy. Your hero isn't just special, he has been chosen by some higher force, right? This is why it's a cop-out. Characters can't be special without being touched by the hand of fate. And anyway, if your character is the only person who can solve a given problem, does that make him or her heroic? Or is it easily coerced? Or just easily coerced? They have no choice but to be heroic, and that's not really That's not really heroism. Very rarely is this trope used well. Most of the time, it's not. Countdown clocks. The Dark Knight Rises has one of these. So why it's easy? Stakes you can measure by actual numbers. Why it's a cop-out? Hey, remember in the Dark Knight where Bane has an arbitrary countdown clock, and that's set for several months, and the story still managed to converge on the final moments of the ticking clock? Well, one of the myriad reasons why the ticking clock is why this movie is not so great, and a storytelling device so lazy, I'm shocked by a guy like Christopher Nolan would use it. Countdown clocks should be outlawed. So, veiling your message in a dream. This too should be avoided. This is a great opportunity to show everyone that you're a real writer, that you can use imagery to convey ideas, or else it's a way to drive home how our character feels about something. Afraid, alone, whatever. It's showing and not telling that this whole thing is supposed to work, right? Why it's a cop-out? Well, this rarely works. Having your narrator describe a dream that just happens to correlate with the story. It's either way too on the nose, or no one would have a dream that specific or ridiculous, or it's so esoteric you have to bend over backwards to connect it to the plot, and when you're bent over backwards you look silly. Using sex as a wish fulfillment. It's easy because sex is awesome, especially if the narrator is an avatar for you. It's a cop-out. There are a few things that make me as embarrassed for an author as when two characters, always bracingly hot, engage in porno-style sex, and you can just tell the writer is working out some kind of personal kink. This is kind of gross. So, magical and noble minorities. This includes the magical disabled and femme fatale. Why this is easy. So, do you need a minority character in your story? Add him or her as a character who helps your narrator. Do it in a mystical way. This will prove that you're not a racist. Why it's a cop-out. Well, indigenous characters with deep connections to the earth, Asian characters with strict ideas about honor, African characters that start off as intimidating but possess an incredible sage wisdom, characters with disabilities as the brains of the operation. They all carry themselves with a quiet nobility. You know what I'm talking about. It's privileged guilt in prose form. And there's a link here to look at Oracle, who is a paraplegic who is the brains of the operation for Batman. So disabled villains is another cliche I want you to avoid. So why it's easy? Do you need a nasty character? Add a character with a disability. After all, they are disfigured in some way and they must be evil. Right? This is a cop-out because a character with a disability as the villain is an ableist thing to do. It's way too easy. The villain stereotype dehumanizes persons with disabilities. It reduces them to nefarious individuals driven to crime or revenge by resentment of their condition. Needless to say, we can really do without such negative stereotypes in a society where prejudice and discrimination against persons with a disability is still abound. And so I have some links here. If you don't know what ableism is, if you don't understand how it manifests in entertainment and popular culture, then go explore these links. So, knocking characters unconscious for plot convenience. Why it's easy? Well, sometimes you have to change locations with a dramatic flourish. What's more dramatic than knocking your character out, right? Why it's a cop-out? If a person is hit in the head hard enough to lose consciousness, they should be immediately taken to the hospital because they probably have a severe concussion. And yet, characters are routinely rendered unconscious to move a plot along or for dramatic effect. I can't think of one good example of a book or a film or a game where a character is knocked out, then has to be hospitalized with cranial bleeding, because that's what would happen. And so there's a link here with more on this TV trope. So I have a couple of links here to more about writing cliches. I expect you to be familiar with the list of cliches and not use them unless I give you an assignment to do so. And the Writing Center at UNC also has a really nice summary as to why you shouldn't ever use cliches. So the rules for this class: I will not, I repeat, not allow you to use cliches unless it is a cliche that is aware of itself. You can do whatever you want when you graduate, but for now, these are the rules. Okay, hopefully you'll discover in school what will make your own work more unique. And if you choose to use these visual or narrative cliches as strategies in your work after you graduate, you will be a leader because of what you've learned.